Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Piss. Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof for the 26th of November 2024. We're going to look at the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, of course. You can find them in the description to the video below. 1,480 personnel lost is still a very high number, like well above that 1,300 threshold that I have previously talked about. We have 6 tanks, which is just a snip below the daily average, 20 troop carrying AFVs, which is round about the daily average, likewise for artillery systems at 19. That, I think, signifies a fairly bad day for the Russians, particularly with personnel losses. 94 vehicles on fuel tanks. It could be that some of these tanks and AFVs are being replaced by vehicles in this category, so you're seeing a higher number there than elsewhere, and 2 pieces of special equipment. No Andrew Perpetual loss list today, but we're going to look at a number of other sources. First of all, we're going to just dip into this. So, actually, the Daily Mail have reported this. I am unsure about this, but it could well be true, of course. Now, we have the knowledge that the Ukrainians sent in a bunch of Storm Shadow missiles the other day that hit what appeared to be infrastructure buildings, possibly an underground command post. The Storm Shadows are bunker busters, so they've got this broach warhead, which is a 2-stage warhead, so it explodes initially, such as the outside of a bunker, to allow the secondary warhead to go in and explode inside the bunker. But we don't really know what happened. There's no footage coming out there other than the drone footage that caught that from above. There was a rumor of a North Korean senior officer being injured. There was some talk about a certain number of casualties, but it's all a bit vague. And now there are claims that a top Russian general and 500 North Korean soldiers were killed by the Storm Shadow missiles in a devastating attack. So that's 500 in that one single attack. Don't know if it's true, but just reporting what is being claimed. This is the Mail Online, Daily Mail. Top Russian general and 500 North Korean soldiers killed by British Storm Shadow missiles. The strike launched on November the 20th, wiped out Lieutenant General Valery Solodchuk, and also resulted in 18 Putin officers reported lost and a further 18 wounded, it has been claimed. It has been claimed he's doing a lot of heavy lifting there. Earlier reports suggest that Kim Jong-un, general, has also been left injured in the attack as he commanded troops backing Vladimir Putin's Ukraine invasion. The strike carried out by Ukraine was the first time UK Storm Shadow missiles have been used to blast targets deep inside Russia. It's understood that the pinpoint missiles had hit a Putin command post and military facility, with the scale of the Russian losses now alleged to be enormous. Russian authorities have not yet confirmed losses, which would be grievous to both Russia and North Korea if confirmed, and the reports are yet to be independently verified. The Storm Shadow missiles were targeted on the 20th at an underground military facility at Marino in the Kursk region. New footage shows a Storm Shadow missile involved in the attack as it flew towards its target, it is claimed. So that aerial footage is what we have seen. So we know there was some widespread destruction taking place, but what that was and what was there and how many people were there, I guess, will be unconfirmed, certainly at the moment, but some really maximalist claims coming out. And if they are true, then that is massively significant for the Ukrainians. Okay, on other personnel issues, the warriors of the 3rd Company, the 2nd Mechanized Battalion, 3rd Separate Assault Brigade cleared Kopanky. Now, I think Kopanky is just below Pischany. If you think of the Oskil River in the northeastern sector from Kupiansk to Svoboda to Crimea, there's this whole big bridgehead that gets to the Oskil River south of Kupiansk, and just south of there is a small village a small town called Persho-Travnevi, and I think just below there is Kopanky. But that's just my memory, so it could be wrong. Recently, the Russians infiltrated the village of Kopanky and raised their tricolor flag, but there are some Russian POWs from that engagement. Also worth seeing, and actually this isn't the first time we've seen this. War Translated says Turets direction, a new type of combat vehicle assault on Ukrainian positions. actually, I don't think that's a new type. This is not the first time we've seen electric scooters being used by Russian troops very close to the contact line. I don't know that these are attack scooters. I don't know. Who knows, actually? Maybe they are. Or just a way of getting more quickly to the trench or to wherever they're going. Now, talked the other day about the S-400 system that was taken out recently in the Kursk region. S-400 air defense system, a radar and 2 launchers were destroyed near Bolshoye Zhrovo village in the Kursk region on the 23rd. 5 military officers were killed. 3 more employees of Almaz Antony were also killed. That's according to Live UA Map. And there is footage now of that. As you can see there, this is the footage of the destroyed radar and 2 launchers as well, supposedly in that destruction. So, good news for the Ukrainians there, but I did report that before. It's just to say that there is pictures, visual evidence of that now. Now, here we have a picture that's been doing the rounds. This is pretty incredible. Ukrainian Frankenstammer, Book M1 Telar, so that's a transporter, erector, launcher, and radar, armed with a RIM-7 Sea Sparrow missiles, concealed inside an underground structure somewhere near the front line. This is interesting, although I do wonder how effective something is when it's underground. An air defense system kind of needs to be out in order to detect, especially if it's radar capabilities on board, needs to be out to detect air threats, aerial threats. So yes, this is safe. This is interesting that they are able to keep these pieces of kit well concealed. But of course, the more you conceal them, the less you use them. However, the more you use them, the more vulnerable they become to counter-battery radar and being struck. If you have these things operational the whole time, then they are just giving out permanent signature. So you need to use them fairly carefully. And I guess this is a case of, right, when we're not using it, it is underground. This bad boy is not just left in the tree line, or out in the middle of a field, because in a tree line that radar gets intercepted. So usually you see them out in the middle of a field, and quite often when they're not operational, they're still left out in the middle of the field. So yeah, this is, I presume, a much better option. Okay, we have seen a Switchblade 600 be used on a Russian T-90M. So this is your biggest, or not your biggest, your most recent Russian tank, which is their kind of #1 tank. We have seen only very limited Switchblade 600 footage because I presume the Americans have requested that the footage doesn't get out. That was what I previously thought. We have this T-90M, a guy out the hatch, and then a significant explosion as that T-90M is hit by that Switchblade. Switchblade 600 is different from the Switchblade 300. Right at the beginning of the war, these were touted as like, oh, the next big thing. This is kind of before drone warfare had become so prevalent, so really early on in the war. And the US provided these Switchblade 300s and 600s, but the 300s were pretty ineffective. Or they're not designed, so they're designed to be anti-personnel. It's basically like a drone with a hand grenade sized warhead. So it's only going to take out 1 or 2 people if it hits people. But they were trying to, I think there were hopes that they could take out vehicles. But the Switchblade 600 has a longer range and a larger warhead, and as you can see, is effective. And that looks to be far more effective than I've seen previously. I don't know whether that's just because it hit the sweet spot and detonated some ammunition on board. Right, Forbes, as I said yesterday in the military aid video, I think, Forbes has reported that the number of Russian Lancets has dropped by 75%. The reasons, says Ukrainian Review, airstrikes on Russian territory, the destruction of operators, but most importantly, the shooting down of Zala drones, without which the Lancets cannot work effectively. This is something that Thierry said in the threads, that not all of the, some of the Lancet loitering munitions, that's one you can see in the picture there, are taken out intercepted by drones. But it's more often that the reconnaissance drones are taken out, upon which these Lancet drones are contingent. And so if you take out the spotter drones, either they've got nothing to aim for, they can't do the spotting themselves, and so they're kind of rendered useless. There are some claims possibly that the reconnaissance drones are used as repeater drones, So it could be that the Lancers then drop out the sky. But either way, they are far fewer, being used far less at the moment, or at least far less successfully. These Wild Hornets and other first-person view drones have reduced enemy Lancet strikes, drone strikes by 75%. And that is the graph to show that. And you can see November much lower than the previous October. And that's 75% on October, by the way. That is much lower than August. So if you're talking about November to August, you're times 9. So it's like 10%, really. Thereabout. So incredible reduction of the use of Lancets. And then you see something like this. So Wild Hornets, one of these not-for-profit drone providers for the Ukrainian Armed Forces, has published a video including 400 plus FPV intercepts of Russian drones, says Erland from Tuchny. Our soldiers, with your help, quote, have already shot down 406 enemy drones as part of the Heavenly Rosaris program, Heavenly Rust Cutter. So that includes, or that entails, 211 Zalas, 137 Supercams, 6 Orlans, so those are all reconnaissance drones, 7 Lancets, so they do take out Lancets as well. They do intercept Lancets directly, but it's more common that they take out the reconnaissance drones, and then 5 other drones as well. Incredible, and that's just from the Wild Hornets drones. So imagine what the total number would be. Okay, Ukrainian forces are using guerrilla tactics in the Kursk Oblast to counter Russian troops, outnumbering them tenfold. It's a 10-to-1 outnumbering there. As Russian reinforcements grow, Ukraine's maneuver-based strategy inflicts heavy losses while avoiding direct clashes. So it's not so much that they are entrenched in these fixed fortifications, but they are still operating maneuver warfare, which is why I've said previously you are seeing more vehicles captured up in Kursk, because they're used in a very different way than they are in other places of the front line. Okay, and then Russia on fire. Another instance yesterday, quite a blaze in the south of Moscow earlier yesterday. A warehouse containing refrigerant went up in smoke, and some noxious gases too. It grew to 2,500 square meters, with some explosions thrown in as well. You can go and watch that on video. So there are a couple more fires popping up recently. I don't know if that's connected to the growing economic malaise. Right, let's go on to distant strikes, and it was a record-breaking night last night, and not in kind of good ways. The Ukrainians were on the receiving end of 188 Shahed drones. Absolutely incredible number of drones sent into Ukraine. They are building these at a phenomenal rate. The Ukrainians really need to destroy that factory. They really do. Alabuga factory. It's quite some distance from the front line. They have reached it previously, but only did minimal damage. They need to take that out. Anyway, 188 Shaheds, 76 were taken out by conventional means, 95 drones were lost by electronic warfare. That makes 171, I think. And then 5 drones flew back to Belarus. That makes 176, which means 12 drones got through, and 4 Iskander-M missiles, so ballistic missiles, got through as well. And as no report says here, unfortunately, critical infrastructure was hit, as you'd expect with 12 drones and 4 ballistic missiles. Now, Ternopil, which is quite a way over in the west of Ukraine, that's been hit before. You've had massive explosions there before. I think there's a huge ammo dump that was hit a year and a half ago, something like that, in Ternopil. It is occasionally targeted, and it was last night. Russian troops launched a massive Shahed drone strike on Ternopil's energy facilities. Head of the city council, Serhiy Nadal, stated that this was the heaviest strike on Ternopil since the beginning of the war. Very bad news there. Interesting stats coming out from the Khayan monitoring service in Belarus, that they've learned that Russia's launched a record 38 drones in 24 hours at its vassal state next door. Electronic warfare could conceivably cause a small number to deviate, but it seems there are many problems with reliability for Moscow. This is far higher than we've seen reported from the Ukrainians, so I don't know what's going on here, but Belarusian Hajun, I don't know how to pronounce that, an absolute record. 38 drones, Shahed drones, have flown into Belarus in 24 hours, At least one was shot down. The aviation took off 4 times over the past. So that could just be passing through Belarus on the way to Ukraine. Over the last 24 hours on November the 24th to the 5th, at least 38 flights of Russian kamikaze drones of the Shahed type into Belarus from Ukraine. No, that's not going through. So that is coming back from Ukraine, were recorded, which is an absolute daily record in the history of monitoring. At least one Shahed flew up to Mazir. There were dozens of flights through the Belarusian corridor, as well as at least 3 times Shahed drones flew into Homiel district near the Novaya Huta border crossing. So I don't know what the exact details there are concerning those, and which direction they're coming from, and whether they're all coming from Ukraine and have been spoofed. But there are a lot of drones, it appears, going through Belarus. Now, in terms of what Ukraine did to Russia, there was quite a busy night inside Russia as well, although details are fairly slim on the ground. Another powerful explosion recorded near Taganrog, in the village of Novobesargenevka. That is, so Taganrog, if you think of the Azov Sea, you've got Berdyansk, Mariupol, keep going. You get to Taganrog, keep going, you get to Rostov-on-Don. So Taganrog, fairly close to Ukrainian front lines, but inside Russia. And then Zalizhny in the port, a port in occupied Kherson, was hit with powerful explosions. That is, if you think of the, you've got the peninsula here, and then you've got Tendriskaya, is it? You've got another that's over here. You have basically other peninsulas, and it's going further on towards. Actually, no, this is there's a spit or sandbar that connects Lazurna to Jalyahach, if that's correct. That kind of island. It's quite an island. I think it's connected. There've been some strikes on there. Anyway, Zalizhny has been struck a number of times previously. It used to get struck quite a lot around the time of the withdrawal across the Dnipro River there. But Kimburn Peninsula, and then other peninsulas along there and whatnot. Some strikes there, and then also explosions in Krasny Sulin in the Rostov region, as well as Taganrog. So air defense apparently active there. We don't really know what has happened as a result of those strikes, but it seems like the Ukrainians are quietly taking out targets, or at least attempting to, on a nightly basis at the moment. It seems to be that most nights something's happening, but we don't always hear the details. Okay. Good to hear John Kirby saying probably what I think he wants to say. My feeling about I've always quite liked John Kirby, but I think he's wheeled out there to say US isn't allowing Ukraine to do X, Y, and Z. And I think he says that through gritted teeth. I think he would like Ukraine, but that could be it. I'm only saying that possibly because I like him. I don't know. But anyway, he's now getting to say something very different, which is good, which is Ukraine can strike Russian territory with ATACMS. He's saying, quote, right now, the Ukrainian soldiers have the ability to use ATACMS to defend themselves. And in an immediate need basis, understandably, that's taken place in and around Kursk Oblast. But I think the understanding is, they can use ATACMS to strike in a much wider remit. There is what was taken away from that. Now, this is some incredible footage of the moment ATACMS hit that airfield in Kursk. So this is deeper into Kursk, and this is kind of what John Kirby's talking about. It's not just about things within 80 kilometers. This is much further away, the Khelino airport. I want to play this to you with sound because it's amazing, but I'll probably get in trouble. So I'll keep it quiet. But it is incredible. So you've got a guy driving relatively close to that airport, and you have these cluster munitions exploding. Already you can see it's flashing there, and then right near him, all across what's probably the runway or some part of the airfield there. There's evidently, people operating there. It's not like a completely abandoned airfield, because you got this guy and you can see he's got his worker's helmet there, obviously swearing liberally, but there is an incredible video of explosions happening right next to where he's at. And you can see these explosions in another video. So a video of the ATACMS strike on Kursk. In addition to the strikes of the Khelino airfield, a Russian S-400 position was also targeted. 2 strikes were carried out on the S-400 position while it was trying to repel the attack. That could well be the S-400 that we've just seen some pictorial evidence of, and here we've got the strikes on the airfield from a distance. As you can see, it's diagonal here, but you can see that they're coming in there. You've got the smoke trails, and also several places, over there as well. Wow. So you've got a number of these sub-munitions exploding. And it looks like those sub-munitions exploded quite some time after you saw those, unless that was air defense. That could have been the air defense. Those smoke trails might be the air defense firing up. Yeah, they are. That's what's going on. Now, there were claims. I think I've got the claims afterwards. Yeah. So a video shows Ukraine, so that's a video we just looked at, striking Kursk airbase overnight with at least 5 US ATACMS cluster missiles striking S-400s. Remember, this was a couple of nights ago. Russian sources reported that 7 of the 8 ATACMS missiles were intercepted. I mean, you can see that at least 2 of them got through, because you can visually see that. Guy in the video says, is this some kind of new air defense system? So that's what he says. No, you're being attacked. But interesting that they claim that 7 out of 8 ATACMS were intercepted. Now, Tataragami talks about this, does a bit of analysis. Overnight, Ukraine, obviously this is not overnight from last night, but the night before. Ukraine carried out a series of missile strikes on Khalino Air Base in Kursk Oblast, reportedly using ATACMS missiles. Here's what we can anticipate based on previous data gathered by Front Intelligence Insight. In recent months, the airfield has been spotted to be home of the Su-25 close air support jets, helicopters, and drones. So you can see helicopters there. And I was wondering whether it was going to be that helicopters were positioned there. For some time, the airfield hasn't been heavily utilized by Russia in the same way as other air bases. Instead, it's primarily hosted helicopters and Su-25 for close air support rather than cab deployments like those conducted from bases in Voronezh or Lipetsk. So it's not that this is where they are releasing those, they are sending those fighter bombers up with carb bombs, but it's more close air support and helicopters. Activity at the base had noticeably decreased in recent days, leaving it unclear whether significant numbers of aircraft were hit. It's likely the strikes targeted supply depots, air defense and radar systems, potentially temporarily putting the airfield out of action. Since early October, Russians have been fortifying their Khalino airbase by constructing new revetments and reinforcing existing ones with what appear to be concrete blocks. By the time of the strike, the construction seemed to be in its later stages, but was not done yet. So it's interesting that they are building this airbase up more defensively, which suggests that they still intend on or are using it, rather than it being not used at all. Front Intelligence Insight team has very modest expectations regarding the number of air assets destroyed at the airfield. If Ukraine successfully targeted air defense assets in the area, it could create opportunities for future strikes with cheaper and more numerous drones. We should keep in mind that ATACMS strikes continue to target military objects within Russia despite threats and nuclear saber-rattling psyops from Moscow. These threats, just like all previous ones, are aimed to sow fear of nuclear escalation and weaken support for Ukraine, and we'll come back to that in just a minute, actually. Ukraine is likely to continue carrying out ATACMS and Storm Shadow scalp strikes within Russia. However, the impact of such campaigns might be seriously constrained by factors like limited missile stockpiles and, of course, by Russia's building up of defences there and moving air assets, etc., etc. Right, on to other bits and pieces. And this has been rumbling on for some time. There have been rumours previously, but apparently the President's office wants to dismiss Kirill Budanov, head of intelligence, from the post of the head of the GUR and appoint in his place deputy head of SBU Poklad. According to, I think is that New Voice of Ukraine? It could be the Dutch outlet. Some public steps have harmed Ukraine. Special operations in Africa, coffee in Crimea, or defence purchases in other countries. I don't quite understand all of that, but this has been potentially on the cards for some time. Budanov has been relatively quiet recently, which is unlike him. Usually comes out with a bunch of cryptic stuff or some fairly confident predictions. He said things about Crimea previously that didn't turn out to be the case, and maybe he's got himself in trouble with saying things that weren't justified. Now, the Pentagon's press secretary, Sabrina Singh, said there are no indications of North Korean troops in Ukraine at this moment. So I did report the other day that there were rumors that there were North Koreans in Mariupol, potentially, and in Kharkiv as well. She has said they're positioned around the Kursk region, but not advancing into Ukraine at the moment. So that's what the Americans are claiming. Russia's military could regain strength by 2027 after accumulating resources, warned Ukraine's ex-top general. So this is Zaluzhny, who's now ambassador to the UK, saying in future Russia may continue exhaustion tactics in Ukraine, aiming to destroy the country's economy, said Zaluzhny. I don't know. I don't think they would, in any kind of meaningful ground way, that I don't think they'd be able to do anything significant for a lot longer than 2027. Yeah, maybe the Navy might be a slightly different case. The Air Force possibly as well. UN has recorded 376 sexual violence cases related to the Russian war against Ukraine. So the UN on the one hand saying, yeah, this is terrible, and then on the other hand you've got Guterres for saying things that really quite align to the Russian propaganda. So talking about like unexploded ordnance and mines, and the US allowing anti-personnel mines into Ukraine has incurred the wrath of the UN, of Guterres. Former British soldier, I didn't report this the other day, I probably should have done. Former British soldier fighting in Ukraine has been captured by Russia in Kursk. 22-year-old former British Army signalman has been captured by the Russian forces while fighting for Ukraine's International Legion in the Kursk Oblast. This is always one of the risks, is like, yeah, okay, it's great to get international assistance, and the International Legion Ukraine need boots on the ground, right? Russia is able to pick up proper mercenaries from all over the world, and then draft in North Koreans. As soon as the Ukrainians get something like the International Legion, they're called mercenaries. Interesting, Sean Pinner had a right go at the Daily Mail for labelling this guy in the headlines as a mercenary, even though I think he's living in Ukraine, a bit like Sean Pinner was not a mercenary, and Aidan Aslin as well. These were people who were living in Ukraine, had roots in Ukraine, British citizens, and then joining the army and so on and so forth. So I don't know the exact details of this guy, but anyway, it's always a shame when they get captured, because they become a really valuable bargaining chip. He'll be far more valuable than maybe 100 Ukrainian soldiers in captivity in reality, because the UK is now going to be fighting tooth and nail to get him back and be giving concessions to Russia as a result. So it's real double-edged sword, really. Okay, we're going to go and look. Oh no, we're not yet. Sorry. There's this story that this guy's on video being interviewed, really animated. He's just back off the front line. Well worth watching, but Anton Gerashchenko breaks it down here. So 8 soldiers of the Svoboda Battalion of the 4th National Guard, the Ruble Brigade, defended a strong point near the village of Sperna, near Seversk. So that's just below the Serebyansky forest on the way to Bakhmut, for 67 days. From July the 10th to September the 16th. For the last 3 weeks, they fought in complete encirclement and fought off the last enemy assault, when Russian assault men stormed their position and pelted their dugout with grenades. The commander of the position was 25-year-old platoon leader, Senior Lieutenant Vladislav Stotsky. Volunteer soldiers from Svoboda Battalion fought alongside Vladislav. All of them had no military experience before 2022. On September the 16th, a Russian assault team attacked the strongpoint with 2 tanks, 2 MTLBs and an infantry fighting vehicle, from which an entire assault platoon disembarked. Svoboda warriors repelled the attack and destroyed the entire enemy assault team. Military correspondent Yuri Butazov recorded this interview with Vladislav a day after he left the strongpoint on the orders of the command and led 6 soldiers out, so he is full of emotions. The body of his brother-in-arms, Alexander Komyak, who died a brave death in close combat with the Russians, could not be taken out of the encirclement. I think he died as a result of the grenades. I highly recommend to watch this interview. It shows the incredible efforts and sacrifices Ukrainian soldiers are making to defend every meter of their homeland. Everyone needs to know this. I think this is listed in the description below. I've got this in the hits and losses section there, rather than, I don't put the other sources in usually, but that one is in there. Just to remind you that a Russian plane was on fire in Antalya, so that's Turkey, which I reported the other day. But what I wanted to add was, incredibly, it was just one of 5 incidents on the same day involving Russia's superjet model. This is a Sukhoi superjet. The 2 others had hydraulic leaks and problems. The other 2 malfunction warnings. I don't know if that is just at that one airport. But issues with Russian aviation. Now let's get onto the economy. Again, keep banging on about this every day. Oil is down 3%. That is huge. If oil is below a certain level, then Russia is not making the money it needs to make, as far as it's budgeted for. It makes a huge impact on the Russian economy and the Russian ability to get income. So the ruble has been at 105.25, 105.5, I think it was at one stage. So Jay in Kiev says Russian ruble is on its death march. It's above 105.5. Above 105 rubles to the US dollar. It is tanking. The Russian stock market has dropped nearly 40 points. That's yesterday morning. So the Russian stock market is in trouble. You can see that downward trend there, very obviously. Yes. Also, right, I don't confess to understanding any of this, so I won't read through it all. But I just started off, and then you'll realise that it's kind of financial gobbledygook to most of us, probably. Okay, this will be a long thread which I'll explain and show the approach of mass corporate defaults in Russia. I will also show that Putin's economy is currently in the worst possible position. Here's the IFX-C bonds G spread. So I think this is a spread of risk and yields. And anyway, basically the bond market is in a lot of trouble. These are corporate bonds. And the yields on them, it's currently at a historical maximum. Huge growth occurred after November 5th. This is a graph of the growth of spreads depending on a credit rating for bonds and loans. So you got all this data that tells you a bunch of stuff about bonds. I can't give you too much detail and explanation about this because I'm not too sure. But apparently it will lead to catastrophic consequences. In the first 10 months of this year, 3.8 trillion rubles were placed. That's up 15%. Next year, the volume of redemptions and offers will be 5.8 trillion. And if you take into account call options on some issues, then 6.4 trillion rubles. I guess that's bad. On October the 30th, the Russian experts themselves admitted there would be a catastrophe that would affect the pulp and paper and wood processing industries, wholesale trade, and agro-industrial complex, and agriculture and construction. Companies need to restructure, but in such conditions, the limits will be closed for many. In addition, companies' profitability is falling. All this will lead to defaults. Friends, I understand that 90% of you don't understand this topic, so I missed out all the kind of geekery. But I asked you to repost it. Yep, okay. And he goes on to talk about bondholder structure. Corporate bonds are owned 43% by banks, 11% by pension funds. And he goes into lots of detail about who controls all these bonds, which is a way of controlling debt and the rating structure, etc., etc. Talks about how the defaults are pretty bad for bonds. Reasons for the problems. Okay, in 2024, corporations reduced the term of new issues by 30%. They began to issue almost 2 times more bonds with a floating coupon. Don't know what that means. The total issue of new bonds increased by 15%. Issuers did not expect that the cycle of tightening credit policy would go so far. Over 10 months of the current year, 3.8 trillion, up 15%, were placed. Next year, the volume of repayments and offers will amount to 5.8 trillion, as mentioned, then actually in reality 6.4 trillion. In the conditions of a tight monetary policy, refinancing will be extremely difficult. And yeah, it goes on with more and more detail there. So, okay. 2025 will be the year of bankruptcies in the Russian Federation, says to Ceratops, who often gives on Blue Sky financial information. After the invasion, the number of debt by corporations issued on floating rates more than doubled. Now all this debt is above the 25% rate. That is another word for death Bankruptcies are up 20%. 200 shopping centres are about to go under. 37% of businesses receive payments late, compared to 22% before. Debt to net profit, EBITDA, is estimated to be above 3 among lower tier junk bond corporations. Don't really know what that means. Increase the interest on the debt and your company is toasted. What that means is that you need 3 years of putting all your profit just towards paying your debt to pay the principal off. Now add onto it 25% interest rate. You are suddenly looking at just the interest alone eating 80% of your profits. Rising defaults by Russian citizens is happening as well. So just kick back, relax, and let's see how the MOEX, that's a Moscow exchange, and Ruble trade today. This winter will be a good movie to watch because you know it is bad when oil refineries in Russia are facing going under as soon as early 2025. So we've been talking about this a lot recently, and some people saying actually they will probably be able to hold on longer than you would think, and other people are dooming and glooming the Russian economy. I'm no expert, so I'm kind of like looking at it all and going, well, I hope it's going to completely crash sooner rather than later. Now, the average cost of a mortgage in Russia has already exceeded 30%. Buyers of apartments on credit will pay 7 times more than the original cost for them over 25 years. So, you know, $100,000 mortgage loan will be $700,000. Right. Okay, so Anton Gerashchenko says, I recommend reading through, which I'm going to do. The overall picture is very telling. Bankruptcies, losses, and optimization of the largest and most important enterprises and banks are happening in Russia. In 2025, Russians will face a new series of losses and bankruptcies. The reason is not only sanctions restrictions, but also growing problems inside Russia. Rusal, one of the world's largest aluminium producers, announced at the start of a production optimization. It will be reduced by 250,000 tons in the first stage. Company explained the decision of optimization by record prices of raw materials and high risks of a continued negative macroeconomic environment. Major Russian mining and metals company Meshel announced the suspension of one of its enterprises, Olzheretskaya Novaya mine in Medjugorje. The reason is problems with the sales market. Major Russian corporation PGSC Gazprom made a record net loss of $6.1 billion in 2023, becoming Russia's most unprofitable company for the first time in 25 years. Alrosa, the Russian group of diamond mining companies, reduced its revenue under Russian accounting standards by 30% and net profit by 3 times in 9 months. The net loss amounted to 6.5 billion rubles, $62.7 million. Baltika Brewing Company is among the top 10 most unprofitable companies in Russia in 2024. In 2022, the company's revenue was about 100 billion rubles, $965 million. In 2023, the net loss was $271.1 million. The option of filling the budget by nationalizing profitable private enterprises has failed. PGSC KAMAZ's net loss for the first 9 months of 2024 amounted to $36.6 million against a profit of $152.4 million for the same period last year, according to financial statements published by the company's website. So KAMAZ, I presume that's truck building. AvtoVAZ, automobile manufacturing company, is talking about possible bankruptcy and debts of over $965 million. This is due to the increase in the Russian key rate. Rosneft CEO Igor Sechin is going to classify data on Russian oil exports and the production volumes of Russian refineries ostensibly to protect Russia's national interests from, quote, unfriendly actions by the USA and other Western countries. In reality, it's to hide the crisis in its field. And sanctions were imposed on Gazprom Bank, the major bank, and 50 other banks. Sanctions were also imposed against the Russian system of transfer of financial messages, sort of Russian analog of the international SWIFT messaging system. Okay, so Gerashchenko then goes on to say today, that was yesterday, today he says, there are clear signs that the Russian economy is heading towards a collapse. 1, resources are being used to the maximum. This means they will be increasingly expensive for enterprises, supply and demand, and not everyone will be able to afford them. 2, prices are increasing and the Russian central bank cannot stop them. Last week, according to Rosstat, inflation rose again up to 0.37, up 0.37. A week earlier, it was 0.30. To slow down price growth, it's necessary either to stop economic growth and budget expenditures, infusions in the military-industrial complex, etc., or put up with inflation rates above the target, the Russian Academy of Sciences said. 3, only certain industries are growing in Russia, primarily machinery. In other words, what the budget pays huge amounts of money for and what goes to the to be destroyed in Ukraine is on the rise. This means that the money poured into the industry does not bring anything to the economy except for the figures that are pleasant to the ear of the authorities. But given the growth has already been exhausted, next year GDP will increase by only 0.5 to 1%, and the growth rates of investments and private consumption may go to zero. In other words, so translating that third point, is that it might look like the Russian economy is doing well or has done well recently because GDP has increased, which gross domestic product, what you produce. It looks like, oh, it's a really active economy. It's producing lots of stuff. It's just producing things to send to Ukraine and to get blown up. And so that's not a healthy economy. It's not, stuff that then gets used inside Russia to create more wealth. Right, so you might be buying stuff for your own business to then create more stuff over here, or consuming things that helps other industries create, build more stuff. So, if I'm buying huge amounts of kettles, then obviously there's going to be lots more tea and coffee, and do you know what I mean? These things are interconnected. You're building tanks to send those tanks to get blown up. It's very very single-minded sector of the economy. Or a very single-minded economy, really. So, and that's not growing by the looks of it next year. So that's stagflation. Okay, 4. The International Monetary Fund predicts that the Russian economy will slow down threefold from 3.9% growth this year to 1.3% next year. This is 3.5 times less than in developed countries and 5 to 6 times less than in China or India. 5. A total of 4,363 legal Russian entities were declared bankrupt in the first 6 months of 2024, which is 40% more than in the same period of the year earlier. And this is with the declared economic growth of 4%. What will happen at the economic growth of 0.5%, as predicted by the central bank? Mass bankruptcies in the economy of the early 90s. Lots of tanks, but nothing to eat. So this is all looking quite positive for Ukraine. But the question is, how quickly will this all come about? Will this all, bring about a huge collapse? Will it do so? And how long will Russia be able to hang on? What are their reserves looking like? They've chomped through a bunch of reserves, but also the reserves look like they have a lot less value because of the value of the ruble. So if the value of the ruble is tanking, then their reserves are worth less. So actually, that's a double whammy. You want the ruble to tank. A pipe with boiling water has burst in the Russian St. Petersburg, 3 people injured. It's an incredible bit of footage, this, because it just looks like a movie. This is like a flood of boiling water in this residential area. Just quite incredible scenes there from St. Petersburg. I don't know, it just shows you that all's not well. Right, okay. Last thing I want to say is this, and this is a bit of doom to finish on, sadly. And the doom is to do with disinformation and Russia controlling the narrative in places like America. America is compromised, but I think the Trump administration is largely compromised. I think there are some good people still hanging around in the GOP, but they're few and far between. And the information spaces have been wrecked. You look at Joe Rogan, the sort of stuff that he's been repeating. Now, interestingly, Dmytro Kuleba, the former foreign minister, has challenged Joe Rogan to go on Joe Rogan. And you've got Vladimir Klitschko has also done so. Hopefully, Ukraine can do something to stem the flow of Russian disinformation and narrative and propaganda that is flooding the airwaves in the US. It's distinctly depressing. And here is what it looks like. So we have been saying for a couple of years, don't worry, the US public is still broadly in support of supporting Ukraine. That has been the narrative that has held on. That despite the MAGA wingnuts saying X, Y, and Z, actually most of the American public are fine with that. Not anymore. Or at least according to this one poll, so take it with a pinch of salt maybe. But the CBS News poll has come out, CBS YouGov News poll to suggest that, do you think the US should or should not send weapons and military aid to Ukraine? It's not send more, it's send weapons at all. Should 49%, should not 51%. That used to be like 75% support for Ukraine. This is super depressing. Super depressing. Pekka Kalinniemi says, of course, the most community noted Twitter account is sucking up to bunker grandpa Putin. But when you talk about these opinions, people that go on Twitter are going to be, for example, but also who turn on Fox News generally, are going to be assaulted with relatively negative opinions about Ukraine. Turn on Joe Rogan. Turn on anything that's got, say, Steve Bannon or Marjorie Taylor Greene or any of these MAGA Republicans. They are going to be spouting pro-Russia propaganda. I don't understand how, I do understand, actually, Russia's disinformation project is insanely good. Here we've got concerned citizen, blue tick. Now, either this is a Russian troll or this is someone who's been sucked in by Russian troll and Russian propaganda. Either way, this is bad. But this is a huge account of disinformation, written, it seems, from a UK point of view. Dear Mr. Putin, we've seen these Dear Mr. Putin tweets and posts before with regard to Biden and America. This one's with regard to the UK. Looks like an impressive piece of military kit Russia are preparing to use right now. I presume that would be the big IRBM missile that was sent the other day. Please know that 99.9% of the Western world who still have the ability to independently think for themselves do not want this. We do not want war, period. However, if you're absolutely insisting on using it, then please aim it at our corrupt politicians that have brought us to this point, sat in Westminster, London, and do us all a favour. This is genuinely a British person calling on Russia to blow up our Houses of Parliament. It's absolutely freaking disgusting, and it's what Jackson Hinkle said the other day that got him cut off from Talk TV. But you're starting to see this rhetoric more and more. And if this is a Russian troll that's saying this, if this has purchase on the audience, then it's doing damage. This is horrible. We are in this existential fight that's gone beyond Ukraine now. We are fighting for the narratives of our own country. We are seeing the Russian narrative gain and gain and gain. And it will be helped by the Chinese and the North Koreans. We are seeing cyber attacks. We are seeing information warfare having great success. You've seen a president that has previously committed crimes, has now been elected in on the basis of doing well with the economy or something, and it's then saying, I'm going to introduce tariffs straight away, blah, blah, blah. But the point is that he has been massively supported by these information campaigns by Russia, and it is worrying, and putting people in place like Tulsi Gabbard, who are just deeply ill-suited to the job and who themselves have pro-Russian sentiments. I'm so worried about the state of the world at the moment. Last night, I don't want to admit this to you, but I'm quite depressed about things at the moment. I'm quite depressed about the state of affairs for Ukraine. Ukraine are fighting for what's good and right. I think I have a good sense of what's good and right and proper in the world. Okay, I have a really strong sense of morality. Whether I'm right or not, you can argue. But I just feel like all the good people in the world, all the good political ideologies are losing out to autocracy. They really are at the moment. Georgia, rigged election, the good people failed. Romania is looking dodgy. Hungary, Slovakia, Serbia, the growth of AfD and Rassemblement National. So Germany, Spain, France. And actually you can add Vox and others in Spain. You can add the growth of these really anti-establishment but actually destructive political forces around the world. All around the world are gaining, it seems. Autocracy is growing. I've just started the book by Anne Applebaum, Autocracy Inc., which is about this kind of loose coordination of these autocratic regimes around the world. That is insanely scary. I am scared for the state of the world, and I think, unfortunately, I think it's going to go wrong in the US for global stability. But I'm going to be happy to be disproved. definitely. And we'll talk about that later in the geopolitical video. It's probably not for this video. But just in general, you know, I am on the edge of my seat, and not in a good way, in terms of what is going on with the world and where is the world going. But I'll be here to hopefully give some kind of sense of, I know it sounds a bit grandiose, but you know, what's good and right and what I think should be the case, even if it doesn't end up turning out to be that. It doesn't manifest. Goodness doesn't manifest in the world's political structures. I'll be here to give some hope, I hope, to the world. Anyway, that's my doom and gloom of the day. I'll speak to you more about that later, though. Something to look forward to. Take care, guys, and speak to you soon.